I've noticed that Twitter has become a better place since the bans. I feel like it's a little bit healthier. And actually, you know, we've had people on this show, Katharine, Anita Sarkeesian, who was in the crosshairs of the Gamergate bullshit. Carlos Maza, who's been targeted on YouTube and has, you know, YouTube's basically been like, sorry, dude, there's nothing we can do. Why do you think now? What happened? I think we know, but this has been a long time coming for cries for these platforms to actually kick off some people who were inciting violence. What is your take on why it went suddenly wrong for them?
I don't think it went suddenly wrong. The thing about tech platforms is that they replicate every power inequity that you see in the real world. Like, that's what they do. That's their deal. And so all of the things that happened this week, they've been doing to marginalized peoples or people who are in some form of threat for years and years and years. You just didn't hear about it. The right wing just screams louder because it doesn't happen to them ever. And so when it does, they get very angry. The other thing is the tech platforms are very like follow the leader. As soon as one of them does something, that gives the rest of them cover to do it. So like, as long as they can like present it as all of us rather than like sitting out on a limb by themselves to get blowback, then they'll tend to sort of go together. And I think that is what happened. I also think there was a moment where they realized that it was going to be worse for their hashtag brands to keep them on than it was to get rid of them. Whereas before, they were clearly profiting from it.
Right. I mean, these are the same platforms that always remind us of, you know, they love to jump on stuff. They love to try and whitewash or co-opt things like the Black Lives Matter movement, you know, and they like to be perceived as, you know, supporting diversity and anti-racism, but don't actually necessarily, and have been making like a huge amount of money off of hate speech. I mean, we know that this like fake news, hate speech, that stuff rises to the top, you know, of all of the algorithms, and it helps them. And obviously, I think a lot of folks had a wake up call. You know, I think everyone had a wake up call, like, oh shit, these motherfuckers are actually going to do things like storm the Capitol when there's massive amounts of misinformation on the internet telling them to do it, and a president who is completely egging them on.
Yeah, I also think for Trump in particular, it was very clearly he was at the end of his power. So the blowback they felt was a lot different. A lot of these companies, and this is the thing I actually have the biggest problem with, have rules, and like, you should be able to moderate your website however you want. They're private companies. They can do what they want. And if you want to scream nonsense, that's what Parler is for. Like, the whole point is that we should get to choose what social media we want to be on, and have the rules be enforced. Most of these platforms, Twitter especially, had a like weird exception that was like, but if it's a world leader, we can't get rid of them because they're too important.
Right.
And like, as I said, it's sort of the structural inequity being like reinforced, that like he can say whatever he wants, but like a sex worker is going to get banned, right? Like that's the kind of thing that ends up happening.
Absolutely. Ironically, one of his favorite things. But, you know, it's interesting, though, because there's this like far right cry of like, this is Orwellian, you know, oh, it's all Orwell. Like, first of all, says the party that fucking loves the slogan, ignorance is whatever, strength. Ignorance is strength, war is peace, freedom is slavery. That's their shit. But they were like,
also very much a socialist, would not be on their side of any point in history.
No, not at all. But they were like, oh, this is Orwellian. And there is a shred of truth there, right? I think the better point they were making, you know, discarding everyone who made it. But the point I think that even, you know, folks on the left are interested and concerned about is why is this decision in the hands of these tech billionaires and just a handful of them, right? And especially when they didn't need access to Donald Trump anymore, right? He was on his way out anyway, so kind of just worked out for them. So how do we address that? What is that like this is ultimately, you know, because people are like, well, it's a private platform. They can do whatever they want. And it's like, well, should it be?
I mean, it should. These aren't like, this isn't infrastructure. This isn't a thing that like the government needs to be in control of. On the other hand, I think the thing that happens is everyone gets up in arms about speech because it's sexy and the right wing likes it because it's cool and speech is fun. But the problem isn't speech. That's not the issue. The issue is competition. The issue is that somehow there's only like even Twitter's not really that big. Like Twitter is barely anything, really. The number of people use Twitter is very small in comparison to the number of people on Facebook and YouTube.
Yes,
like,
yes.
Those numbers are so huge.
Yes.
And so it's not as much about speech as it is if there were many platforms and you were just picking the one you liked best, their influence wouldn't be to the point where we would have to care. I would love to wake up and not have to care about Facebook. It's my goal in life is to go to work and to not have huge chunks of my day be what did Facebook do?
Right.
And so that's really, and I think that's part of the problem is right-wingers don't like regulation that promotes competition because that's big bad government. And free speech is a much easier thing to scream and have people like rally around you, where it's very difficult to be like antitrust, woo.
Exactly. Hey, thanks so much for watching the Bitchuation Room podcast live stream. And while you're here, why don't you just subscribe to this channel? I promise it'll be good. Promise.